All right, let's get on our topic about China.
Yes,
So there is a lot going on with China, of
there
course, on all
is.
fronts. But
Yes,
today, like we said, we're gonna focus on economics. You've been in China before, right?
I have.
So you
And
did a school tour, I believe. Was it a
so
school
I did,
related?
yeah, I did a corporate visit. So
Corporate.
yeah,
Okay.
my degree is actually in global business. And so my intention was to be an expat in China or
Mm-hmm.
South Korea
Mm-hmm.
after I graduated. And so I did corporate visits. And I was, at the time, I was actually very impressed with how quickly China's economy was growing.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the reasons that any economy grows actually is because of debt. So there is a cycle, and Ray Dalio actually spells this cycle out extremely well. And one of the ways that countries really grow and gain power is through acquiring debt. So if you
Okay.
look at this, so this is from Morgan Stanley. So this is China's level of debt. You have household debt, which has grown substantially. So this is from 2008 until um, now, and then projected into the future.
Okay.
So we have household debt in China that has grown substantially, and we have government debt that's grown substantially. But it's actually non-financial corporations that have grown in massive amounts of debt. So what we're looking at right now is China's debt is now 300% of GDP, which is really substantial. And so in a sense, we've talked a lot about the United States and our debt crisis, because our debt crisis is horrendous.
Oh yeah, I
And
heard.
we've just been, proverbially kicking the can down the road until we can't do it anymore. But unfortunately, China seems to be doing a similar thing also.
Okay.
And so one of the big problems that's happened, so we have.
But hold on a second.
Yes.
Is it at the same level as the United States? In other words, the debt.
Nothing is at the same level.
Okay, so that means China is on a safer path, shall we say, in comparison to the US for the outcome. You know what
No,
I'm getting at, right?
maybe not. So
Okay,
here's the thing. So the country that actually has the largest amount of debt per GDP is Japan.
Japan, yeah,
And
yeah.
Japan has been functioning this way for a while, for actually a long while. But the real issue with China is that there's kind of, how there was or is a coordinated attack against the US dollar to sort of dethrone it as global currency.
Yeah.
Right now we're seeing kind
I
of.
gotta, I gotta challenge you.
Okay, go
I
ahead, go
gotta
ahead, go
challenge you.
ahead. Yes.
Just on the wording, coordinated,
Yeah.
because how that happened to begin with, due to our own
Right. I agree.
failed
I
policies. So
agree. And
it's a
sanctions.
reaction.
Absolutely.
It's a reaction.
Absolutely it is.
So yes, I see the wording you meant. You
Yeah.
meant good with it. However, I have to. I couldn't this lit pass. You know me. I'm like a filter. I
Yes,
have to
you
make sure.
absolutely
I
are.
have to make sure. But I know what you meant. I know
Yeah.
what you mean. It's a coordinate in the sense of countries are fed up.
They are
Yeah.
fed up.
As a matter of fact,
Absolutely.
I just find out that about 90% projected all the energy transactions will be done in none other than US dollar.
Yeah.
That's moving forward. But you're absolutely correct. Countries have coordinated to move that direction.
Right.
So
They have, and understandably, like, you're absolutely
yeah,
right.
yeah,
That's absolutely understandable. Right now we're looking at a situation where sanctions have been weaponized to the extent that countries had to go figure something else
something.
out. And being tied to the US dollar means that anytime the interest rate goes up, anytime there's fluctuations in the value of the dollar, it's other currencies have a much harder time regulating their own
Our
economies
economy. Yeah.
because of that. So the dollar unfortunately has been weaponized. And when you weaponize something to that extent, people
Yeah.
find other ways. And that's what seems
Yeah.
to have happened
And that
here.
explains why China also is getting rid of the US treasuries.
Right.
As a matter of fact, if I
Right.
am to say, if I am to think in terms of the historical trends, I'll
Hmm.
go back to the 80s.
Yeah.
How was the economy in Japan at that
Right.
time?
Oh,
So,
right.
well, who sank the economy of Japan?
Th-
We did.
yeah.
We did.
Well, and
Because
the Japanese also.
yeah, but it was planned.
It was,
We
yes.
did not want Japan to move that
Right.
fast. They were moving at a faster pace than you can even imagine.
Right.
And we had to figure out a way of how to sink their economy through the financial aspects of it
Yep.
using the dollar. That's why they sort of bought a lot of U.S. treasuries, and they are the largest holder. I don't see the same outcome with China.
I don't, and here's the reason I don't, because China is a very large economy.
Okay.
And so, Japan, although Japan is kind of big on the global stage, they're a small economy, they're a small country.
Yeah.
China isn't, and China has a large percent of the world's population.
That's correct.
So does India, of course, but India's economy isn't the same as China's economy. It's not even in the same playing field.
You can even compare those
Right.
two.
It's not comparable.
Actually, believe it or not, at some point,
Mm-hmm.
actually, I'm glad you brought this up because I'm going to share it with you guys, all of you, to see. At some point, I'm going to show you a graph.
Yeah.
And just you guys take a look, and you'll see how at some point China and India economy crossed like this.
Really?
Yeah. But after that, it went up.
It went up.
So take a look at this, guys. I'm going to show you here, share it with you. And look at this graph. Can you see?
Nope. Yep, there it is.
Okay. Now,
it's coming.
Just watch this where it will cross in the 81. 81, 82, 83. And look what happened after that. Look where it's going. Right there. It crosses. Then all of a sudden, just
India
look at
drops
that.
off.
Look at that.
Wow.
Look at that.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. All the way up. So I'm glad you brought this up, because to those who argue that India is going to be the superpower, it's nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
India is not going to overtake China.
Oh God!
And China is going to overtake the US. And this is why I wanted to share this with you.
No, that's a wonderful graph. Thank you so much for sharing this.
Share that. Yeah, I get them on my my Twitter feed. So
yeah.
So just to highlight to you guys,
that's a great representation.
Exactly. So that we're going to tie it to your point about where China's headed with its GDP and debt.
Right. So, and I want to be clear that debt is something that is very typically used to build up a country.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't something crazy. This isn't something that China shouldn't be doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, sometimes when you grow, things get out of hand. And so one of the things, we watched Evergrande, right? So we had Evergrande,
Mm-hmm.
and then the formerly largest property developer, Country Garden, I think it's so they entered actually into a grace period because they also had failure problems.
They missed payments.
Yeah. So not only them, okay, but so now one of the country's biggest private wealth managers missed payments on multiple shadow banking, meaning high yield products. So I want to speak to China's real estate for a second, because China's real estate is possibly the largest asset class on the planet. And I want to show this. This graph showing exactly how big China's. There it is. Showing exactly how big China's, especially residential property asset class is. It's huge. Look at it compared even to the United States.
Wow.
That's substantial. So for China to have these problems in the real estate sector isn't the same as if the United States was, although when the United States had problems in the real estate sector, for example, 2008, the situation was horrendous.
Well, we saw the outcome of that.
Right. We unfortunately saw the outcome of that. But so when China's having problems in this asset class, it's a really big problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so now back to Zhangji, I hope I pronounced that right, Enterprise Group, which Bloomberg calls it a secretive financial conglomerate that manages about 1 trillion yuan, which is $138 billion. And so they have actually missed payments.
Oh.
And a total of 106 trust products worth 44 billion yuan defaulted this year alone through July 31st. So last month, according to data provided by Use Trust. And real estate investments accounted for 74% of that by value. So looking at and I know that this is like a lot of heavy information, but it's important that we're looking at how important China's real estate is to China and looking at where a lot of these things are failing. And that's real estate investments. So in between China's Garden, Country Garden, Evergrande,
Evergrande.
and now Zhangzhou Enterprise, we're starting to see, and China's economy's growth has slowed
Okay.
substantially.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to bring this up because China is facing a lot of these problems as it's sort of externally trying to mitigate them.
Yeah.
China's youth unemployment rate is seriously high. From April to June, the jobless rate for 16 to 24-year-olds. So I mean, this is a population of young people that
Yeah.
should really be beginning their lives, reached 21.3%.
I wonder why that is.
I also wonder why that is.
So, if I am to think outside the box, I would say the advancements in technology will now convince the young generation to say, well, I need to work for, let's say, hypothetically, for
Yeah.
$2 a
That's
day
that's
or
a
an
great
hour
question. Yeah.
when I could do something else differently. So, why even
Yeah.
bother with working? However, knowing what I know a little bit about the Chinese culture and the
Right.
mindset, they won't think like that.
Right.
They're
That's
hardworking.
unfortunately a little bit of
Well,
a
because that's
Western
one thing
mindset.
about the changes in society.
Yeah.
Anytime society advances, the mindset also will have to
Exactly.
reflect that one. That's just me thinking outside the box here, looking from outside in,
Yeah.
because it surprised me when I read the stats too.
Right.
Why the young unemployment, or youth unemployment rather, in China is high.
Is so high.
So is this a reflection of the new direction of the where China's headed as
Yeah.
far as technology and all that stuff? Young people don't want to work.
Right.
That's kind of,
Well, I don't, it's probably a combination of
yeah,
things, right? It's
yeah.
probably a combination of the jobs that they went to university for
So
are
which means
not there, right?
which means society is becoming more educated.
Right. And that's a similar thing that actually happened here and happens in countries as they
Yeah,
get stronger and stronger economically. And we've been having a lot of conversations about Africa recently,
yeah,
and one of the biggest reasons is because look at all of the world's eyes are turning to Africa.
for
One of the
sure.
reasons is because Africa is starting to develop. And so right now we're seeing population boom in
So,
Africa,
and it has a young population.
and it
So
has a
that's the thing.
young and growing population.
Yeah,
And population that is actually willing to work for a very very low wages, which is one of the ways that China actually built up what it has now.
yeah. Well, that is where I say the difference about the new lifestyle in China of
Yeah.
today versus 40 years ago. 40 years ago,
Hugely
there
different.
weren't many conveniences per se.
Mhm.
So the young generation that is born into the web
Yeah.
era and all that, and TikTok and all that stuff, they're not gonna know about the hardships of what that country went through
Right.
before. It's no different than what we have here with the young generations. They
Yeah.
don't understand.
Yep.
They have no clue. They think it's given that they have to have A, B, C, and D.
Yeah.
No, you don't have to have. You have to work and earn whatever.
Right.
You don't. It's not given. I don't believe in handing. So, and this is the problem we did on a government level when we had the
Yes.
housing problem.
Yep.
Did you know that our government bail out to the big banks for that?
I
$780 billion.
sure do.
And you know who paid for that?
We did.
We did. And as a matter of fact,
Absolutely.
we haven't get that money back.
And we never will.
I don't
And
think
where
so.
did that money go?
I don't think
That money went to CEOs,
so.
C-suites, board of
I
directors.
tracked some,
Yeah.
believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, they were given as bonuses for Christmas on that
Yeah.
20 on the Christmas of 2008 and on the Christmas of 2009.
And were they given as bonuses to everyone
No,
or
no,
just
the
the higher
CEOs,
ups?
just use the higher ups, the higher ups.
Mm-hmm.
So and Obama, because he came the president in 2008,
Yeah.
pushed for that. Oh, we're gonna have the companies pay back the taxpayer.
That never happened.
Liar. He lied.
Of course he did.
So this is where now I read some articles about what's going on in China.
Yeah.
And a lot of voices inside China saying, forget about bailing them out.
Yeah.
And I agree with that assertion. And I sort of personally, I would support if I were in a position of policy making.
Yeah.
That's what I will go for.
Yeah.
You know,
Honestly, I would too.
yeah, they created the problem.
Yeah.
They have to deal with the consequences. So it becomes the question of should the government in Beijing bail out those
Right.
or let them fail. There
Yeah.
are two sort of school of thoughts regarding that.
Yeah.
One, it says if Beijing let those companies deal with the consequences, then it will send a strong signal to other companies not to take on more debt that they can
Right.
afford.
Right.
The other school of thought is saying that will be bad reflection on China's on a global stage. That it couldn't even have its order, its business in. What am I doing? I lost my train of thought.
That it's businesses.
That has a
Yeah.
business in order
Yeah.
domestically.
Yeah.
Because if you are to move on a stage of being a global
Mhm.
superpower, how can you, like the example of India?
Right.
You know, I'm not picking on India here. It's a real example.
Yeah.
How can India be talking about or superpower status when your infrastructure
way.
at home inside is a mess?
And the thing is,
poverty.
everyone knows that.
Yeah,
Everyone knows it.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm starting to feel comfortable calling the Prime Minister Modi an
Mhm.
ideologue.
Yeah. Yeah, wanting
reality.
things to be
It's reality.
amazing, but
So,
the reality is
yeah.
that they're not.
Yeah, China on the other hand is different, of course,
Yeah.
because where it is infrastructure and so forth.
Very
but it's
different.
still that per se, like I always say, in international relations, context matters.
Yeah.
The fact that it will be perceived on the global stage that what China couldn't take care of its domestic
Yeah.
mess with the debt of these companies. So that's what I'm saying. We're just presenting the argument here for
Yeah.
you to see both sides of the argument. We can't say, well, this is right or this is wrong. No,
Right.
no.
Right.
We're just presenting the argument. And this is where I see where that youth and employment's so almost tied to that idea of the advancements that the Chinese society is experiencing.
Yeah.
The standard of living,
Right.
it's going up.
Right.
So is this going to be bad?
Well, first of all, it is to have that level of unemployment in any economy is a problem.
I'm surprised.
And China has a very large older population and a smaller younger population. And I understand why that happened. I understand why they felt that they needed to do the one child policy back then. But I think that there was no real understanding for the economic consequence. Either there was no real understanding for the economic consequences of that in the future, or they didn't care. And whoever was in charge then was just like, I'm going to kick the can down the road. And that's their problem.
There's
right?
a third option.
What is
that
it?
could be was done just for a certain time period, rather. Another word, you could the policy when it was implemented back in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
It could have been thought of in Beijing at that time, and I don't know this for sure. I'm
Yeah,
just me thinking
I
outside
don't
the box.
either.
It could be for, let's say, let's implement this policy for the next 2 decades,
Right.
or a decade and a half, and we see where things will go. Because remember, Beijing reversed.
Right, they did.
So
they did. So somebody
that's why I'm
figured
saying-
out
that's
like
why I'm saying
that
what I'm
needed to
saying.
change.
It,
Yeah.
it convinced me that
Yeah.
the thinking back then was it's gonna be just temporary.
temporary.
That's
Well,
my
even
thinking.
temporary, even for the couple decades that it went on,
created-
it
yes,
created some
yes.
economic challenges that didn't show up initially,
Yeah.
but they did show up and they are showing up now.
Yeah.
So, and I also, this to me, and I think globally, this was actually a very questionable move. The strictness of the zero COVID policy that China enacted, and I think it was only released at the beginning of this year. I mean, it was for a very long time, and it
Yeah.
was very strict. The problem with that is it constricted the economy, it constricted economic output, it constricted the economy and China's economy, and so it constricted foreign investment. And so I don't know. I actually wondered what their thinking was in the zero COVID policy by doing that, because I personally never take anything at face value, right? So if there's a policy enacted,
Yeah.
I very rarely, if ever, think that that's what it's about.
Mhm.
I always think it's about something else. But across the board, those policies across the board in the countries that were the most extreme,
Yeah.
it caused damage to the economy. It caused huge damage to our economy here in the United States.
Well, for us, it was also by design.
Yes.
So
We can talk more
we'll
about
talk
that on
about that on
Rumble.
a Rumble, and we intend to
But
do
a
so.
lot of voices, I remember even Peter Schiff, he came on the show,
Yeah, I
remember?
remember.
And he said the policies that are enacted during this time period, things are going to get way more expensive. So if you need to buy something
Buy it
that's
now.
expensive, buy it now, which was back then.
Yeah.
What and he said that people are going to not be able to afford to live in their own homes. They're going to have to move in with family members. What's happened?
Which is exactly,
That's
especially for young
exactly what
people.
happened.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I believe China did because I believe they are aware, based again on the reading that I've done,
Yeah.
and I usually read around before I'll say something
Of
to make
course.
sure they did understand that whatever needed to be done during that period, it was done. Except
Yeah.
it was also time to reverse that,
Right.
and they did. That's why I just saw an article 2 days ago about the travel. It's
Yeah.
completely open now. You get travel. That's because they realize also the impact it had on the economy.
Oh, huge impacts
But
on the
it wasn't
economy.
just them. It
Yeah.
was on a global level.
Global
So
level.
because this was managed certain ways,
Yeah.
and we'll talk about that one on a Rumble.
Yes,
with
that's something
details.
we
We'll talk about
can't
that.
talk
Yeah.
about much here.
So the idea of understanding, to tie this one to the current, for example, youth unemployment, or
Yeah.
even the state of the economy for China, it's still doing better than other countries. I mean,
it
in the
is.
big picture.
It
Because
is.
I
Yeah.
read the estimation, or the estimate, or rather the what do we call it, the forecast
Yeah.
of the IMF at that point, when it said, well, the Chinese economy is going to go down by about
Yeah.
2.5, when in reality it was in reverse.
Yeah.
It was in reverse. I think I did talk about it in one of those videos.
And
So the IMF wanted to say that
Yeah.
to justify certain. Remember, when IMF says something, is to push.
Absolutely. And
push the
remember, the IMF was the IMF wishy-washed
Of
recently
course.
also about, there's going to be, there's going to be whatever, and then it wasn't, and then
No.
so they go back
No.
and forth, right?
This is why we had the Secretary of Treasury went to China. She is
Yes.
very respected over there because she's even.
I liked her magic mushroom situation.
Well, yeah,
I
I
thought that was
know.
great. And I'm not even kidding. I
I know
actually
what
thought
you
that
mean,
was
yeah.
fantastic.
But she is a data driven.
Yeah.
Janet Yellen tends to look at the numbers. I mean, she was realistic in some approaches, except for lying about inflation being
Yeah,
temporary.
no.
Come on.
Yeah.
Be honest and say the truth to the American people. But the idea of her fear, at least based on what I read
Right.
from some sources, her fear was the issue of China selling U.S. debt.
Yeah.
They are not taking on that for the.
Yeah.
Actually, basically, she was almost asking, "Hey, can you
Right.
buy more?"
Right.
And China said, "Well, we're gonna have to think about that one."
Absolutely.
Because what they were doing, China, that is selling the US debt and reversing it or converting it to gold immediately.
Yeah.
Something Japan didn't do.
Well, Japan maybe should.
Well, Japan, because it's too late for Japan.
Yeah.
Japan is under our firm control.
And Japan's economy, it's been this way for a while, but Japan's economy, I don't know how people don't think it's precarious.
No,
and that's
it
just my
is.
personal
And
opinion.
it is.
But
It is.
I don't know how people don't think it's more precarious than
We
it is.
intended for it to be